One moment, everyone, while I share my screen here and hopefully it goes smoothly. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for having me and thanks for listening in, everyone. I'm excited to share on one of the annual publications I oversee, and this is the Alaska Higher Education Almanac. Um, if you're involved in education, I think there's something for everyone in this publication. It is a pretty dense publication, so given the short allotment of time right now, obviously this is going to be a pretty quick overview of everything. Um, I did want to allow for questions along the way. So if you have any, feel free to pose those in the chat and Dominica will help stop me to answer those and happy to take them at the end as well. So in my overview today, I just want to go over what the Almanac is, why we produce it. There's some main sections in this Almanac, so to go over those and mention where we get our information from. Um, I then want to go into a bit more detail on each section, so you're aware of kind of some of the statistics that you can find there. It won't be all encompassing, but should give you a little snapshot. And then next, I selected some key metrics that I wanted to highlight, some things we've learned from putting the Almanac together. And then lastly, just present to you where you can find this publication if you care to access it or share it with anyone else. Dominica, everyone can hear me, correct?
Yes, yes, we can
Okay,
see the presentation
thank
and we
you.
can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. I should have checked sooner. Okay. So to start, what is the Alaska Higher Education Almanac? It's an up-to-date guide that provides an overall view of higher education in Alaska and how Alaska compares to other states. The purpose of putting this together is to assist any kind of education stakeholder, legislators, policymakers, in helping them make informed decisions on the direction of higher education in Alaska. So the first edition we released was in 2017, and it comes out on an annual basis. We are now releasing kind of in springtime. So if you are interested to look at our newer editions, check in around spring. And what you can find in the almanac here, we break it into 5 main sections, which we like to try to keep pretty consistent across our editions. First, we have an overview of ACPE and the Alaska Student Loan Corporation. Next is a lengthy dedication to data points specific to higher education in Alaska. That's followed by how Alaska compares on key metrics on the national stage. Um, the, we move on then to a section summarizing the federal and state financial aid options, as well as any available programs ACP offers to Alaska students. And this will include then information on the merit-based Alaska Performance Scholarship, as well as the needs-based AEG, the Alaska Education Grant. Last but not least, we have a section devoted for profiles on Alaska post-secondary institutions as well as Alaska training providers. So before I go back into those sections a little more closely, I want to point out a few key sources that we use for the data in the Almanac. Our primary source that we utilize is IPEDS, which is the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System. It's a publicly available database. Any institution, university, technical or vocational vocational institution that participates in federal student financial aid programs contributes to this database. So we just access what data is useful for us and then present it in a digestible format. But that is all publicly available information. Another key resource we depend on is the National Student Clearinghouse. This is a nonprofit providing college enrollment, completions, and degree data. I've also provided, you can see on the screen here, a whole bunch of other resources that we use for exhibits throughout this publication. And that includes data internally from ACPE, as well as surveys we provide to universities to garner some more specific Alaska data points that aren't actually accessible through a database such as IPEDS. Any questions at this point?
I don't see any in the chat box.
Okay. So moving on then to looking at these sections more closely. I am, for time's sake, going to skip our first section, which is just the overview of ACPE and the commission. I'm going to move directly into our higher education Alaska context section. And so some of the statistics that we report on here include statistics on standardized testing, the WUI and NC-SARA distance programs, enrollment trends, completions and credentials awarded, education attainment, and economic impact as it relates to education in Alaska. And the exhibit example I've put on the screen here is more just to give a flavor of the kind of visual you might find in the publication. This specifically is referencing undergraduate and graduate enrollments, and I'll come back to enrollments later on in the presentation. So our third section is going to be comparing Alaska metrics to national values. This is a pretty dense section, lots of information we put into a small number of pages. The format you'll kind of see here, if you do dive into this section in greater detail, is we like to present a metric, Alaska's metric. The rank, in this case, Alaska is last, so 50th. We report similarly ranked states to Alaska, and then list the top state and then the lowest state for that particular metric. So that's kind of the format we follow in this section. We list things, a whole bunch of stuff, a bunch of demographic information, education attainment, graduation rates, poverty rates, tuition and fees, college debt, etc. So I've only listed some of what we cover in this section on the screen. There's some very interesting takeaways from this section, so definitely deserves a closer look. One example is looking at full-time versus part-time students. So on the national stage, we see a pretty even split between full-time and part-time students. You'll see Alaska, however, is heavily skewed with 8 out of 10 students being part-time, only 20% full-time. So just as an example of something that gives us an idea of the landscape here in Alaska for students. So then our publication moves on to financial aid. I'll be brief with this. Basically, this section summarizes federal and state program contributions and presents some outcome summaries on the grant and scholarship program, AEG and APS. In this latest edition, we did start including, we launched some specific articles that address the Alaska FAFSA Completion Initiative. So any further updates to that initiative will be included in future editions. So this is a resource you can go to check in on that. We also included an article looking at outreach efforts on smart borrowing practices that ACPE has, as well as cost savings that students gain from ACP loans when compared to other private lenders. And then our last section is the section featuring individual profiles for each accredited institution. as well as a list of Alaska training providers. So the example we have here is what it would look like for one of those accredited institutions. This is University of Alaska Anchorage. Again, as you can see, we pack a lot in. So for each individual profile, you can find demographics, enrollment, tuition and fees, retention, graduation rates, award totals, top programs. So a lot of good information specific to that school. As far as the Alaska training providers, most of the information you'll find here, which is a great reference resource to kind of see what's out there, is actually gathered through surveys that ACPE sends out to the training providers. We seek graduation rates, top programs, tuition and fees, and accepted forms of financial aid. And so as a note, this list will change from year to year a bit, depending on the kind of participation we get. And I'm sorry, are there any questions at this point?
I don't see any in the chat box.
Okay. All right, so I want to move on then. I pulled a handful of key findings that we've learned from the Almanac that might be of interest to you today. The first pertains to high school graduate, high school graduation rates. So one of these statistics is the National Adjusted Cohort Graduation Rate. Alaska has one of the lowest rates. So we are in the bottom 5, have been for a while. The average from 2016 to 2020 is 79%, with the national average sitting around 86%. A note about this data in general, or this metric, is most states fall within 80 to 89%. So there's a small chunk of states that fall below 80 and a small that land above. So it's a pretty narrow range we're talking about when you see this graduation rate. However, Alaska is still on that lower end. Another thing then that we look at in the Almanac is Alaska high school graduation rates, public 4-year, but in different categories. So for class of 2021, for instance, Alaska natives had a graduation rate of 66%. So that is something that we like to maintain in that publication. The second metric I want to highlight involves enrollments. The Almanac devotes quite a bit of time to enrollments. Here I am only focusing on enrollments of high school graduates that are entering college 1 year after their high school graduation. And basically what we've seen is a declining trend over the last decade. So for class of 2022, only 34% of students actually entered college the fall following that high school graduation. And then that leads into another statistic that might be even more important, which is looking at the increasing proportion of Alaska graduates, high school graduates, that are seeking higher education outside of Alaska. So of those 34% of students that are going on to college, over half of them, 54%, are actually enrolling outside of Alaska. And this is a trend you can see there in the second line graph. That's been happening for quite a while, but we had kind of the convergence happen around COVID year. So this will be interesting to monitor over the upcoming, 5 years, 10 years, to see what can be done as far as retentions and help keep students in Alaska. And then the last metric I wanted to bring to your attention was a little blurb on persistence and completions. We do like to track recent cohorts. So the cohort 2015, for example, about half of them entered college a year after their high school graduation. However, only about a third of them, of the entire cohort, persisted to their second year of college. And then this persistence, or I should say this cohort tracking, is based on degree seeking first time 6-year graduation rates. So by the time we progress to our 6th year, we only have about a quarter of the original 2015 cohort completing a program that they started. And then this ties into post-secondary graduation rates. And so unfortunately, Alaska's 4-year post-secondary grad rates is the lowest in the nation at 33%. That would be this kind of pie chart here, not really pie chart, circle line chart, bar graph here. And you'll see that the national average is sitting about 60%. There's Alaska at 33. Interestingly, this is actually reversed for Alaska's 2-year post-secondary grad rates, where we sit towards the top. A few years ago, we were number 1, past year, 2nd, so sitting around 70%, whereas the national average is sitting around 36%. So to wrap this all up, I just want to share where you can get this publication in its entirety. It is downloadable for free on ACPE's website. Couple ways to get to it. One is to go directly to that URL, acpe.alaska.gov/reports. That will bring you to this reports screen where we house all of our recent or the most current versions of our publications. Or if you are more familiar just accessing our homepage, you can go there and then scroll all the way down to the bottom to the footer. And on the right-hand side, there's a right-hand column under research and policy analysis. There'll be a little reports link, and you just click reports, and that'll divert you back to this reports page. If you scroll from this reports page, if you scroll down a little ways, we have all of our almanacs actually archived. So you can access any of them anytime, download them, print them out, whatever you would like to do. They are there for you. And with that, I want to thank everyone for listening in. And if there are any questions, I can take them at this time.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Yes, we do have one question from Catherine. Is that measuring Alaskan student grad rate who attend both in and out of state?
This graduation rate here?
Correct. I was just wondering, out of the students, because you had mentioned we have a little over half of our kids are going out of state. So do you have data on whether or not the kids that go out of state versus ones that stay here have different graduation rates for college?
You know, we don't have an exhibit specifically addressing that, but that is a very interesting question. And we are always trying to update our publication to include information that education stakeholders are interested in to know. So I'm actually going to write that one. I'll write that one down because I do not believe at this time we compare those two populations.
So the data you have here, is that for kids, all students that go to college, or is this just kids that stay in Alaska? Do you know?
I believe it's kids that stay in Alaska.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Kids graduating from an Alaska post-secondary institution.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We have another question in the chat box from Kathy. Do you know what curriculum/major the 2-year degrees are, if different than the 4-year degrees that were not completed?
I do not have that full answer. Can you repeat can you just say that question one more time for me?
Sure, I can do that. Or Kathy, if you would like to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Kathy. I was curious whether or not there's even any knowledge or awareness of why there's such an increase in the 2-year program completion versus the 4-year completion. And my ultimate curiosity is really focused on, is it because the 2-year degree curriculum is and major is different than what a 4-year college degree would require? So is there a higher interest in what the 2-year degree options offer versus the 4-year degree? And is that why that 2-year degree is highly completed?
Very good insight. One kind of have a non-answer for you. Our publication is very much driven to present data, not necessarily analyze potential reasons for why values are the way they are. We try to present as unbiased a view as possible. Just here is what the value is. And then different groups might reference and take this information and try to answer questions like you just posed right now. So I personally do not have an answer of why exactly what is going into the higher rates at these 2-year post-secondary institutions versus the 4. I'm sure there's quite a number of reasons, some more obvious than others, but that's not quite something this publication aims to address.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kirsten, I have a question about credentials. And so we are listing certificates that only the certificate of completion that comes from post-secondary institutions in Alaska, or does this number also include a certificate of completions of registered apprenticeship programs?
Is this in reference to one of my slides specifically?
No, I apologize. I am
no, that's fine.
looking at the almanac and
okay.
Page number 13, where we list the percentage of an award type between males and females for certificates, associate, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate professional. So I was just curious if the certificate also includes a certificate of completion of registered apprenticeship programs, because you mentioned that the data that you also, the data source is also Alaska Department of Labor and Workforce Development. So I was wondering if that is the information that they share with us for the purpose of the almanac.
And this is, you said this is page 13?
Yes.
Yes, exhibit 20 there. Okay.
Yes, 20 and 22, yes.
Yep.
Well, it says certificates awarded at Alaska post-secondary institutions. But since you mentioned Department of Labor and Workforce Development as the data source, so if what kind of data do we get from Department of Labor then?
So in this information is coming from IPEDS. So they will have some pretty specific definitions for what they consider to be credentials. I'd have to look those up and reference those to see what that encompasses. We do have a data note section in the back that goes into a little more detail. I can take a second and look at which exhibit we specifically get data from Department of Labor for. But for those that you were just referencing, we pull that information from the IPEDS database.
I see. So that tells me that we do not include the registered completions of registered apprenticeship programs, since those are not through post-secondary institutions. That's the certificate of completion from the U.S. Department of Labor.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Yep.
We have 2 more questions if you would like to take them. Kimberly is asking, are online institutions in the calculations for out-of-state data?
I am not sure on that actually. And I have to say there is uh I work with our executive office. They usually field a lot of these kinds of some of these kinds of questions. So I can certainly provide that contact if there is questions that you would really like answers to that I cannot provide sufficiently today. Um, do you have an example of one of these online colleges, just out of curiosity? I don't know if I'm familiar with them.
Kimberly, if you would like to unmute yourself, if you'd like. Phoenix, she says Phoenix.
Phoenix. I do not believe that is included.
Actually, Kimberly has a follow-up question that I will read right now, and then I will go back to Noel's question. Could the rise in out-of-state numbers during COVID be due to students moving to online programs?
Yes, it could be. Yeah.
Thank you. Noel is asking, how is this data compared to graduates enrolled in trade schools?
That is a great question, an excellent question. And I don't know if I'd be able to adequately answer it quickly right now. I'm scrolling up through the Almanac since I did have that accessible. We have, pardon me, give me one moment.
And Kirsten, you mentioned at the beginning that the data is only from Title IV schools that participate in the federal financial aid, correct?
Yeah, most of this would be exactly Title V. Our inclusion, really, I think mostly what's included as far as the trade schools, you will find in that last section of the Almanac that is looking at the training providers. But those I do not believe are actually data from that is not included in most of these exhibits because of the Title V status. Title IV, sorry.
And you mentioned that the data for Alaska training providers is received from the training providers because you sent the survey.
Correct.
To those, yep. And they answer the questions and this, okay.
Yes. Yep. So they are currently our only, we don't go through somewhere else to get information on these training providers. They give us information directly.
Thank you. The only well, ACPE, right? ACPE is Alaska Vocational Technical Center. This is the only, well, trade school, let's say,
yes.
that participates in the federal financial aid. So it's a Title IV school. So this is the only one that is included in the Alaska Post-Secondary, in the Exhibit 57, school profiles, yes.
Yes, yep. And so that is sort of the, that's sort of the caveat a little bit. Let me find, here we go. So when we're talking about Alaska's 2-year post-secondary graduation rate, that is mostly, I think that is exclusively referencing ACPE.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, so I will make sure to write down the questions and send them your way for you to gather more information, and then I can share with our attendees a little later today or whenever you provide me answers. So.
And thank you everyone for the questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions or raised hands, I believe, at this time. So Kirsten, I really appreciate your time today. And also another, just a quick comment. kudos to Kirsten. She's our publication specialist. All the graphics included in the Almanac. That's her work, wonderful work that she does for us with all the publications. So we are lucky to have her. Thank you so much, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, or stay with us if you'd like.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.